My name is Bill Sizemore, and I'm going to take you back to the founding of the country. How many of you are familiar with the documents that were written by three of the founders to persuade the states to modify the U.S. Constitution? Familiar with those? The Federalist Papers, correct. One of the things that was spoken of often in the Federalist Papers was the purpose, intent of our structure of government of being one of a balance of powers. Not all the power would be divested in a president. Not all the power would be in Congress or the judiciary, but the three of them would balance. The same thought also carried through to the idea of factions. Today we would call factions special interest groups. Then the founders considered that these special interest groups would all vie with one another and compete for power, and that competition amongst all these different groups would result in some kind of balance, that it would be difficult for any of them to prevail. But as time passed, we found that in our nation's history that there were things that could happen that would result in not having a balance of power. You know, the initiative process was started in Oregon back at the beginning of the last century because of an imbalance in power. And you know who was in control then? Corporations. Primarily the railroads. The railroads were buying and selling politicians like they were cattle at an auction. They just bought the votes. In Oregon today, we have an imbalance of power. The public employee unions control this state from top to bottom. The governor's mansion, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Treasurer, Superintendent of Education, the House, the Senate, they control it all. 2 U.S. senators and 4 congressmen as well. That kind of imbalance in power is not healthy for our state. When I announced that I was running for governor, I said this: I am running to break the stranglehold that the public employee unions have on the state of Oregon. It's not an anti-public employee crusade that I'm on. I think all of us know and recognize that there are lots of good school teachers and firefighters, and even lots of people working in bureaucracies that are nameless, and no one sees them. They're dedicated and hardworking. But the reality is the public employee unions themselves are doing things that, if they were done in the private sector, would send people to prison. You know, in the private sector, if a labor union negotiator was to give money to someone on the other side, and that they were later going to sit down at the bargaining table and negotiate with, that they would go to prison for that. And if the person in management who was negotiating with the unions took money from the union people, they would go to prison. And yet, we have on the other side of the aisle, and if they were here today, I would say the same thing as I'm going to say right now to you. We have John Kitzhaber and Bill Bradbury vying for the money that the public employee unions will give them for their campaigns. And if you look at the C&E reports on file with the Secretary of State's office, you will see that tens of thousands of dollars at a time is pouring into the coffers of these two gentlemen running for governor, coming from entities that are later going to negotiate with them for contracts. They're going to literally sit across the table, or their agents will sit across the table from one another, and they will negotiate with the person that they put into office. And so you wonder why we always need more tax revenue. You wonder why our schools are having to lay off teachers and crowd up classrooms, because we are feeding a public employee retirement system that is unsustainable and has left us $13 billion and counting in the hole, an amount equivalent to almost the entire general fund of the state of Oregon for schools, for public safety, for welfare, et cetera, for a 2-year period of time. Now, there are capable men up here running for governor on the Republican side besides myself. But I will tell you, what we need right now is someone with the know-how and the courage, and I certainly have the battle scars to prove that I have the courage to take on those forces and bring balance back into the system so that the taxpayers and the good people and the small businesses of Oregon are represented, and the public employee unions are not calling all the shots. Again, I'm Bill Sizemore. I appreciate your vote.